Resuming debate, the honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And following that speech, I think it's important that we really get focused on the actual motion and the actual report that has been tabled in Parliament. The previous speech seemed to assume that we were debating a larger issue around privacy and something that can continue to be studied, but we're actually this is a very specific motion. This is, in fact, a very short report. So, first of all, Mr. Speaker, I should inform you that it's my intention to share my time with the member for Battle River Crowfoot. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm the chair of this committee, and it was a real pleasure to table this report last week. This report was the result of a motion that was moved by my bloc colleague, the member from Trois-Rivières, that was passed unanimously by the committee last Monday. It is a simple report. It's one of the shortest reports that I recall ever being associated with. It simply informs the House that the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics call upon the government to suspend the Public Health Agency of Canada's cellular data tender upon adoption of this motion, and that the tender shall not be reoffered until the committee reports to the House that it is satisfied that the privacy of Canadians will not be affected. That's it. I just read the entire report that was tabled. We are asking, the committee is asking the government to suspend an RFP that has a deadline that has just been moved again, I understand, but this month. So this is timely. This is something that isn't something we should go back and restudy. We're calling upon the government to take a concrete action about business that is underway right now. So as chair of the committee, it's my responsibility to ensure that members of the committee have an opportunity to be heard and that the rules of the committee are followed. It's not ordinarily my job to take a position on the motions moved at committee, other than to break ties, but it is my job to ensure that motions are dealt with properly and the privileges of committee members are respected. And in this case, the motion was debated at last Monday's meeting. Amendments were moved by both the governing party members and opposition members. And through a fairly lengthy debate on the amendments, the committee passed the amendments and the motion unanimously. So in debating concurrence on this motion, I think it's important that the House be made aware of the process that produced this short report. It was proposed by an opposition member, but in the end, and after improvement through debate, it was unanimously adopted. Now, the reason I've joined this debate and take time to walk members through the process of how this motion came to be adopted, it's my sincere hope that the House will unanimously adopt this concurrence motion. I hope that the House will concur in this report with the full weight, perhaps we'll have the full weight of a recorded vote, and that government will take a unanimous committee report seriously, and that it will actually suspend the request for proposal that is at the heart of this motion. Right after the House rose for the Christmas break, reports in the media broke stating that, unbeknownst to anybody, the Government of Canada had been secretly using mobility data from 33 million mobility devices. These are what the reports just after we broke came out and said. And this news was shocking to many Canadians. But what was even more shocking was that the only reason that this came to the public's attention, seemingly, was that there was this public tender for a new contract to extend the program for another 5 years. The deadline to respond to that request for proposal was the third week of January, Mr. Speaker, meaning that this RFP would open and close while Parliament was not sitting, and members of Parliament would not have an opportunity to question the government about it. The committee held an emergency meeting on the subject in mid-January and unanimously voted to study the entire subject. That study is underway at committee. It met this morning in furtherance of that study. But curiously, the government extended the deadline for the RFP on the eve before the emergency meeting, Mr. Speaker. And it further extended the deadline till later this month. In response to committee, which is now earnestly studying the broader issue, we have called upon the government to further suspend it until until we have had a report back, and we are prepare a report that will state that we're satisfied privacy is not unduly at risk. So some might ask why the need. In fact, the member from Winnipeg North asked why, hinted around whether or not we really needed to debate concurrence in this report. Well, surely the government knows that this recommendation came with unanimous support from parliamentarians representing all recognized party, and we'll just follow this recommendation, right? Well, the governing party members, I mean, they supported this recommendation, including the parliamentary secretary to the Prime Minister, who in fact worked with and moved one of the amendments that was passed unanimously. But this doesn't seem to be the case, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Health appeared at our committee last Thursday, and when asked about this very motion and suspending the RFP, the Minister refused to commit. He talked about how the RFP had been extended, but when he was questioned about why it was extended, he spoke about the need to give prospective bidders more time. In fact, it sounded like there were no bids, and that perhaps there was a single contractor that was asking for more time. But regardless, the minister did not acknowledge the real concerns about ensuring that the privacy of Canadians were protected, and he made no indication that he was going to actually suspend the RFP pending the committee's report, which is what this motion and this report calls for. So choosing not to respond to the substance of the report, it goes back to and reminds one of an early promise that this government made when it was first elected. It promised that it would listen to parliamentary committees, and yet this government has quite spectacularly failed to do so. The incredible lengths that this government has gone to ignore committees and even defy the will of this entire chamber is a matter of historic record. One recalls how less than 8 months ago, the government dug in so deeply on its refusal to comply with the Health Committee's request for documents related to the Winnipeg virology lab, it prompted the incredible spectacle of a public servant being admonished by the Speaker of the House in furtherance of this government's cover-up, a matter still unresolved. This government also prorogued the House to prevent committees from getting to the bottom of conflicts of interest that were at the heart of the summer jobs, the student job program contract with the WE organization. Government also said that it would respect the independence of committees. And at committee after committee in the last Parliament, we have seen the repeated use of filibuster tactics to prevent motions from coming to a vote. So fortunately, Mr. Speaker, this has not been the case at the Ethics Committee. As I've said repeatedly, this report was adopted, supported unanimously. It should be supported by this House unanimously. Yet the government has given no indication, including in the response to the direct question asked twice to the parliamentary secretary, to the government House leader, that it will, in fact, agree and concur with this report. And so I'm not surprised that my Bloc colleague has moved this concurrence motion. I'm sure he is very concerned that the government will ignore the will of this committee. But regardless of the outcome of this concurrence debate, I wonder if the government will note that this motion came not as an attempt of Conservatives to disrupt their parliamentary agenda. There were media reports last week saying that Liberals were looking for partners to ensure that they could pass time allocation motions and things like that to avoid what they call Conservative obstruction. Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope the Liberals don't think my Bloc colleague is guilty of obstruction, because this government has given every indication that it plans to ignore a committee recommendation that was passed unanimously. Perhaps the government will take note that when members of Parliament debate bills and motions in this House, that they are actually doing their jobs. Our seats in this House are not here for us to be spectators. We're here to debate. We're here to use procedural tools that exist to ensure that the rights of members to represent their constituents are used. And perhaps they will also note that all parties use these tools when it's necessary to do so. So in closing, I do remain hopeful that all members of this House will join me in voting in concurrence with this report and add the weight of a vote in this House to the report to urge the government to do the right thing and suspend the RFP until the Ethics Committee has finished its report.
Question commentaire, questions and comments. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, maybe the member can answer a fairly direct question for me on the issue, and that is, when will the committee have its report finished?
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
We don't know just yet, Mr. And I can give him a direct answer. We spoke about this today. We are in the process of, all together in committee, all members, including members of the government side, of compiling witnesses. Not all witnesses have been available and there's often a lot of trouble with coordinating these things. But this investigation is going to take a while, Mr. Speaker. It's not going to be finished immediately, but in the meantime, they should suspend this because it's that important.
Question commentaire, l'honorable député.
Questions and comments, the honourable member for Trois-Rivières. I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Speaker, and my colleague from the committee, who has raised some very important points, because this was something that was voted on unanimously. That's not just pie in the sky. This is a clear message that we're sending throughout the House to say all the parties agreed on this. And so that needs to be kept in mind, especially when we say that things shouldn't be delayed. Dr. Tam said that really no lessons had been learned, and so she said that that it wasn't very serious. So we have a specialist, one of the greatest specialists here in Canada, who said that. So could my colleague remind us of some of the messages that Dr. Tam issued? Thank you.
Honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, my colleague from Trois-Rivières raised a really good point in talking about the case for urgency, which has not been made successfully at committee. We have heard from experts already, including Dr. Tam, including the minister, including the privacy commissioner, and so far the committee does not feel that there is a sense of urgency that would negate the importance of this report, the recommendation contained in this report.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for Moose Jaw Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, could my colleague elaborate more on his concerns and differences in the testimony given by the Privacy Commissioner and the testimony given by Public Health? Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, yes, there are conflicting. There is uncertainty around how much consultation, if any, occurred on this, which goes to part of the why it's important to adopt this recommendation that will suspend the RFP until the committee can actually get to the bottom of ensuring and assuring Canadians that if this program is to continue, that it will not adversely affect the privacy of Canadians.
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments?
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. I'd like to hear his opinion on something. I've been following the discussion, and I hear the government side telling us, well, you know, it's not serious, don't worry. But we have to go fast, but we're going to be careful. And that reminds me of the We Charity file. At first, it was like, no, everything's fine, everything's in order, the program's well developed. It was the only business that we could hire. And then all of a sudden, it was about cronies. So I'm kind of, I'm worried they're going to prorogate in a month or something like that, like they did last time. So I don't know how my colleague can convince people on the government side, the Liberal government, just convince them that we're not attacking them. The motion from my colleague from Trois-Rivières doesn't take anything for granted. He mentioned so many times in his speech, we're not assuming that anyone's at fault, but we just feel that we need to study this seriously. We're managing all of Canada. So can we get serious about this and respect people's privacy? What does my colleague have to say?
All right. Well, he raises a good point. I mean, the government's track record on listening to committees or even following votes and orders of this House is not good. The idea that they would, well, I mean, he didn't really have a question there, but asked for my opinion. And in my opinion, yes, this motion is necessary given the track record of this government.